My name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living. And today we are taking a look at a really amazing condition, original factory setup on a Selmer Mark 6 alto saxophone. This one is in the 116,000 serial number range. It has the long bow. This is American engraved, American assembled. That means it's soldered in here in the bow to body joint. It has engraving that I typically think is nicer than the European style, and was done just a little bit different as far as their setup. So you can take a look here. We can see, you can actually see the pads. It's pretty easy to tell when they're original. They've got a certain color to them, and they actually clamped them down and then shot a final coat of lacquer. So you usually have shiny outer edges where the lacquer is on it. Usually has, cork on the bottom of the key feet and green felt on the top there. You might be wondering, well, felt, like you can't really sand that. How do they make those adjustments? Well, they bend the keys so that they fit, so that everything's an adjustment. And then that felt helps the bars not bounce and not be too noisy, at least back when this had oil in it. You can also see on the bottom of the foot here, it's got cork then on a felt disc on the body to prevent too much bounce. The key heights are fairly open, both on bottom and on top. Now, this saxophone had the original plastic resonators, which look like this. Blue domes with a little brass screw in the back. Earlier ones would have had basically the same exact, basically physical shape. Hopefully that's lined up for you guys. Except they would have been made of, I think it's nickel-plated brass with a nice big brass washer and screw on the back. Full sets of these are worth a ton of money. These originals are not worth much, at least as far as I know. People usually replace them with heat stake resonators of the same shape, size, and coloration. A lot of times the threads on these, which you can see it's got a brass screw and a nylon or plastic resonator. A lot of times these threads are messed up and it just won't hold very tight against the back of the pad. So heat stake ones are used instead. You can also see the neck on this looks really nice. Original neck cork for these was cut in a different way than cork that you see today. As far as I understand it, what we're looking at here is cork that was cut along the thickness of the cork. So cork is like bark that peels off a tree. This is cut along the thickness of it, rather than along the width of it. And the basic difference being this is cut along the width of it or length of it. This way, which you can see looks sort of like this stuff, with the way that the occlusions really drag on for a while, and you've got this banding. Makes for really nice key corks when you cut the cork sideways, which is what I use this thick piece of cork for. But I've never seen cork thick enough that I could cut a neck cork out of it sideways. That's always interesting to me when I see that. Green felt most everywhere. The A and the bis are in slightly different, their hinges are in different places, so they actually slide against each other a little bit. Not a ton, but sometimes you'll see a slightly different shape there as far as what they put on there, but usually on the altos at least, it's just a circular piece of felt on that key there. Also, we've got felt on the back here, green felt here, green felt on the G sharp, green felt back here. They used this gray plastic tubing for the octave stem, and also when you were, and you can see there's probably some fuzz on here. That's actually just from the case. I'm not sure how it got in there, but it's sort of stuck on there. The same gray stuff that goes around the stems on the side B flat and side C. Some people like to duplicate that, and as far as I know, you can get this. This is basically I don't know, maybe 12 gauge. I'm not totally sure because I don't do it, but I think this is just gray electrical wire. You can either get just the insulation, or you can take the wire out and use the insulation, and you can duplicate that. But that's not something I do, so I don't know a ton about it. Cork here, This one always kind of like bothers me because it's really squishy, but that's how they have it set up from the factory. You can see the key heights, and also a nice big long piece of cork here. It's peeling away, but still doing its job on the E flat. Then on the D there, on the F, they've got a little piece of felt, and that's what the heights look like on the palm keys, not crazy high. Although I've seen these like pretty variable. But typically the key heights on the stacks are always pretty open. And the low C is always really open too. I mean, that is a lot of venting for the low C. And the way that these are built, they really have a lot of room for venting in the low C. You can see there's still a huge green piece of bumper felt there that you could shave that down quite a bit and open this up even more if you wanted to. Typically when I do Selmers, they seem to want more open key heights than a lot of other makes. I'll be somewhere around this, maybe a little bit lower, especially like on the left-hand stack. If the C isn't stuffy, you know, then that's kind of a pretty good indicator because that's a very undervented note. The B and the B flat, you can see where those are. You can see those pads are still in pretty good shape. Engraving's really, really nice looking. And this discoloration, which you guys might be able to see, where it's like lighter here and darker here, that's actually where this was laying against the case. And that's something that you see in some of these old horns where, you know, they oxidize unevenly. The original color was probably, I'm guessing, somewhat more like this, but where air has been able to reach it, it's darkened over time to a slightly darker color. But that is, it could just be me guessing, but you know, where the case wasn't touching, like on the keys, it's a pretty even color. But maybe it started out this way and then got lightened by touch. I don't really know, but you see that quite common on horns that have been sitting in a case for a long time, especially if they were in a relatively warm environment. The spring's all nice and clean. The spring tensions are pretty substantial, nothing like modern horns. You can basically cheat and not need to have good pad work by having really strong spring tensions that people need to squeeze really hard to overcome. Modern horns are really, really, really tough in general. This is probably more, you know, got more spring tension than say like a Super 20 would or a Zephyr, but probably like, you know, 2/3 as much as like a modern Yamaha, maybe half as much as a modern Selmer. Fairly light compared to modern horns, a little bit heavy compared to older horns. You can see everything is nice and straight here. You can see how they've got this set up, the octave key. Usually they had, you know, a piece of cork, let's see. Okay, a piece of cork on the bottom here, two pieces of cork that didn't go all the way around on, not on the inside of this key, but on the outside of this key, top and bottom. And you got a little piece of cork here and here on the rocker, a little piece of cork here on the rocker, here on the rocker, and then a piece of cork down there. And you can see on the E, sometimes, you know, this has like a little cutout like this one does, sometimes it doesn't. They put cork usually just on the end there, otherwise it gets a really gushy feeling when too much of it contacts at once. But there you have it. So, you know, the main interesting thing about this is, you know, the key heights, I think, and also the fact that they just, you know, put certain thickness of materials on before they actually got the padding done. And then they would bend the keys so that they were in adjustment versus, you know, having slightly different, having it be close and then having slightly different pieces, you know, being able to sand the cork or whatever they were going to do, or even have it compress over time. They just bent it into place. But, you know, I mean, I did a little bit of work on this. This horn is going to be sold as is. This is from Get a Sax, and, you know, a lot of people are looking for a horn that's unmolested. I just did a little bit of cleanup of work on this, made sure that it's like, it actually plays on its original pads. Not amazingly, but pretty well, considering how old it is. And it's, you know, ready to be overhauled, and it's really, really good shape, and everything moves freely, and everything is straight and been inspected, and everything works. So it's kind of a nice way to get a saxophone if you are able, is an original condition. That way, you know, no one has, you know, mistreated it with a screwdriver or pliers. But that is what a American assembled Mark VI in the mid-period with long bow looked like coming out of the factory. Oh, and it might be interesting to note, let's see if you can see this. Right in here, look at that red rouge. Sometimes you'll see that on Selmers. I mean, you know, they did have unlevel tone holes. They would leave red rouge from the buffing process. This is probably sloppier than I'm used to seeing, but that's underneath the lacquer, and that's obviously original lacquer. This is not refinished. But sometimes you'll see that. It's not always an indicator of being refinished. Sometimes they came like that from the factory. It just depended. But yeah, every once in a while you see that. Oh, and I guess I forgot to show the G-sharp and the G-sharp bis adjustment. So you've got a cork, basically, against that G-sharp there. There's nothing. It slides a little bit. Mostly it kind of like rocks into place. So you end up with a, let's see if I can hold this in a way that you guys can see, end up with like a depression in that cork, and it kind of like rocks home onto it. Doesn't seem to cause like any ill effects as long as nothing else is adjusted, so that, like, you know, placement of that divot doesn't change. They put cork in these. They didn't shape them in any way, just like chunks of cork that, you know, over time sort of get squished in a particular way. It seems like they set them a little bit heavy from the factory. I mean, you can actually probably see here. You know, that's where the cork starts to touch, and I'm holding this down pretty tightly. That's where the cork starts to touch, and like that's where the pad really feels like it's seated. So they usually, you know, between the hard springing, that really means that you're probably squeezing hard enough to close that, but that could be done a bit more precisely. Oh, and the C sharp, it's just, again, it's a lot like the G sharp. It is cork on brass. Let's see, yeah, put a leak light in there. Let's see. Don't know if it's going to be too bright to actually like see anything, but there's what those pads look like. All right. Hope you found that helpful, useful, and informative. My name is Matt Storr. I repair saxophones for a living. Thanks for watching.